Today I am going to go over lesson 2.1 in Spectrum Science grade 3. This lesson is called Getting to the Bottom of Things. It's on page 22. Before I start reading the passage, I am going to go over vocabulary and concepts on the left side of page 22. Most words today are going to sound new if you haven't studied chemistry before. Chemistry is a really interesting field of science, but it involves learning a lot of vocabulary. So let's get started. The first word is substance. It means physical material from which something is made. It can be physical things that can be seen, touched, or measured. They are usually made up of one or more elements. The next word is element. An element is a matter that cannot be broken down into simpler matter. An element is made up of only one kind of atom, and atoms are the building blocks of everything around us. That's why we cannot break it down anymore. Let's try to understand with an example. To build a house, we need a lot of materials, such as mud, cement, bricks, sand, steel, and wood. By using materials in different quantities, we can make a simple house or a really huge, complicated house. Similarly, there are about 118 elements which combine in different ways to make all kinds of substances. The book says there are 117 elements, but one more has been discovered since then. Some examples of elements are hydrogen, helium, carbon, oxygen, calcium, nitrogen, sodium, iron, silver, and gold. Now let's move on to the next word. It is molecule. It means the smallest particle of substance. A molecule is when two or more atoms join together and are stuck together in a particular shape or form. Not all combinations are possible. The next word is compound. A compound is a substance made of two or more elements. Believe it or not, compounds are all around us. Turn on your faucet and water will start pouring out. Water is a compound because there are two different elements, hydrogen and oxygen in it, and its chemical formula is H2O. That brings us to the last word in this lesson. Chemical formula is a short way to write the number and types of atoms that are in a molecule. It's just a simple way of writing long names. For example, as I said, water's chemical formula is H2O. It means there are two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. Instead of always saying two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom every time, we made the name short and we just call it H2O. Let's now read the three remaining paragraphs. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. Hydrogen atoms make up nearly 3/4 of the universe's weight. A hydrogen atom is the smallest and lightest out of 118 elements. At regular room temperature, hydrogen is a gas that we can't see, smell, or touch. Let's read the second paragraph now. Iron is the most common element on Earth. It makes up a little more than 1/3 of Earth's weight. There are few things that you use every day that cannot exist without iron. They include cars, trucks, trains, buses, refrigerators, washing machines, stoves, dishwashers, and even your toaster. Now, let's read the third paragraph. There are 117 elements, but only 92 of those are found in nature. Scientists created the rest. Right now, there are 118 elements. Now, I will read the passage. Getting to the bottom of things. Atoms are everywhere, but you'll never see them. Read on to find out what they are. What do you think is small? A mouse? An ant? How about a grain of sand? Actually, none of these things even begins to compare to the tiny size of an atom. That grain of sand, for example, is made up of about 70 million atoms. That's 7 followed by 19 zeros. There aren't that many grains of sand on an entire beach. Tiny as they are, atoms are very important. They are the building blocks of every single thing in the universe. Your chair, this book, the air, even your body. Everything is made of atoms. Most of the things you see around you contain many different kinds of atoms. A few substances, though, contain only one kind. These substances are called elements. Aluminum, iron, or oxygen are elements you might already know. Others are less familiar, like molybdenum or terbium. Each element contains one kind of atom. So far, 117 atoms have been discovered, which means there are 117 different elements. Molecules are the smallest particles of a substance. For example, you've probably heard water called H2O. This chemical formula tells you that the smallest unit of water you can have, one molecule of water, has 2 atoms of the element hydrogen, H, and 1 atom of the element oxygen, O. The 3 atoms combine to form 1 molecule of water. This type of molecule is a compound because it is made up of different elements. If you break this molecule apart, you no longer have water. You have the 2 elements instead. When an element exists by itself, it could be a molecule of 1 or sometimes 2 atoms. For example, the chemical formula for an aluminum molecule is Al, and the formula for oxygen is O2. Can you tell which molecule is found as 2 atoms? Atoms work together sort of like an alphabet. Think of the atoms as letters and the molecules as words. The letters H, O, U, S, and E mean something, but the letters K, D, O, E, K, and P don't. The atoms prefer to combine to form molecules in certain ways, but not all combinations of atoms are possible either. We are finished reading the passage. Now I am going to start explaining it in detail. Everything around us is made up of tiny little things called atoms. A grain of sand is made up of over 70 million atoms. We cannot see atoms because they are too small, but they are everywhere around us. And we are made up of atoms too. Interestingly, there isn't just one kind of atom. There are many kinds of atoms. Their sizes are all different, as you can see in the picture. Helium is known to be one of the smallest atoms. Oxygen, as you can see in the picture, is a little bigger than helium. Sodium atom is bigger than oxygen atom. Calcium atom is the biggest out of these 4 different kinds of atoms. An element is made of one type of atom. There are many elements that you might have seen or heard of before. As I told you before, you probably heard of gold and silver, which can be found in expensive jewelry. Oxygen can be found in water and also in air. Chlorine can be found in the swimming pool. It is added to water and has a distinct smell that you might be familiar with. Iron, as I said, can be found in cars, trucks, buildings, and many of our home appliances. Helium can be found as a gas and is often used in balloons to make them float. That means if we don't add helium in balloons, then they won't float up in the air. Another element is hydrogen, which we talked about. Hydrogen is abundant, meaning you can find it everywhere, and it is very common to find it. And we are familiar with it because it is in water molecules. Carbon is also found throughout Earth. It can be in many different forms. It can be a gas called carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It can also be found in nature as diamond. It is also in graphite. And remember, there is graphite in your pencil. It is the gray part of your pencil, and it is also called lead. Molecules are formed when there are two or more atoms that join together in a particular shape or form. The most common example of a molecule is water. It is made of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, and its chemical formula is H2O. If we take a look at the chemical formula H2O, we can see that H stands for hydrogen and O stands for oxygen. There's the number 2 after H, meaning that there are 2 H's or 2 hydrogen atoms. For every water molecule, the oxygen atom is in the middle and it is joined by 2 hydrogen atoms. From the chemical formula H2O, we know that there are 3 atoms that make up 1 molecule of water. Compound is a substance made of 2 or more elements. Is water a compound? Let's take a look. Hydrogen is an element. Oxygen is another type of element. So H2O, or water, is also a compound because it is made of 2 elements, hydrogen and oxygen. An important thing to note is that the 3 atoms in H2O must be joined together to become a compound. Otherwise, if they aren't joined together, then you just have 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. It wouldn't be a compound, and it wouldn't be water. As for the last paragraph in the passage, if you were confused about it, let's think about atoms. Atoms prefer to combine in certain ways only. It's kind of like how we don't get along with everybody equally. We have a closer group of friends and form a group together with them sometimes. But at other times, we don't form a group with other people, unfortunately. When hydrogen and oxygen combine to make water, they prefer to join with 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. You cannot make water from 3 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Another kind of compound is CO2. It stands for carbon dioxide. You might have heard of it when we talk about the environment and pollution. Carbon dioxide is a gas that is produced in the air when you exhale or breathe out. Small amounts of it are okay, but it is a problem when it is produced a lot. And that happens when we burn down forests and drive a lot of cars on the road. If we take a look at CO2, we know that it is made up of C, which stands for carbon, and O, which stands for oxygen. There is 1 carbon atom and 2 oxygen atoms that combine together. CO2 is a molecule as well as a compound. I am finished explaining this lesson now. I will read the questions and explain them further. If you prefer to do the questions on your own, then please pause this video now and do the questions by yourself. Since this is one of the most difficult lessons for you to do on your own, I will go over all of the questions and give you a short explanation without telling you the answer. If you prefer this, then please continue listening. Circle the letter of the best answer to each question below. Number 1. Which of these things is made of atoms? A. An orange. B. An ice cube. C. The helium inside a balloon. D. All of the above. If you have taken classes with me, you know that I always like to check my answer in the passage before picking an answer. Let's find the word atom in the passage to see what it says. It can be found in the second paragraph. It says, tiny as they are, atoms are very important. They are the building blocks of every single thing in the universe. Your chair, this book, the air, even your body, everything is made of atoms. Hopefully, this should give you a good idea of what things are made of atoms. Let's continue with number 2. A breadcrumb contains blank atoms. A. About 500. B. About 20,000. C. About 1 million. D. More than 1 million million. We can't just guess how many atoms are in a breadcrumb. If you recall, the passage talked about how many atoms are in a grain of sand. Let's find that sentence first. Please read the first paragraph. What do you think is small? A mouse? An ant? How about a grain of sand? Actually, none of these things even begins to compare to the tiny size of an atom. That grain of sand, for example, is made up of about 70 million atoms. That's 7 followed by 19 zeros. There aren't that many grains of sand on an entire beach. Okay, now let's think about the size of a breadcrumb and compare it to a grain of sand. A breadcrumb is a small crumb or a small piece from a piece of bread. We know that a grain of sand is even smaller than a breadcrumb because it's almost like a speck of dot. Since a grain of sand is 70 million atoms, the breadcrumb is probably over 1 million atoms. Let's continue with number 3. The formula for oxygen molecules in the air is O2. This means there are 2 oxygen blank in each molecule. A. Grams. B. Atoms. C. Compounds. D. Elements. It is probably not grams because we didn't really talk about weight or grams specifically in this passage. Please review the definitions of atoms, compounds, and elements before picking your answer. Let's continue with number 4. Different kinds of atoms combine to form A. Terbium. B. Oxygen. C. Compounds. D. Elements. A. Terbium can be found in the passage. It is the last sentence of the third paragraph. terbium is an example of an element, so we know the answer is not A. Let's also take a look at B, oxygen. Oxygen is also another type of element. That means both A and B are types of elements. As for C and D, please check the definitions before picking an answer. Let's now go to number 5. Write your answer on the lines below. NaCl is the chemical formula for table salt. Na is an abbreviation for, or a short way of writing, sodium. Cl is an abbreviation for chlorine. Do you think salt is an element? Why or why not? For you to answer this question, please figure out what sodium and chlorine are first. As for the chemical formula, NaCl, please figure out if it is made up of one thing or not. Is it made up of 2 things? 3 things? So these 2 hints should help you in writing your answer. The last question under What's Next is about the periodic table. It says, the periodic table is a chart that lists the different elements. Look for a copy online or in an encyclopedia. How many of the elements are familiar to you? The periodic table is a chart that shows all of the elements. They are in a specific order and all have a number that belongs to them. Some of them are in the same color because they share an important quality. Please take a look at the link I've posted in the video description. You will find the periodic table there. Don't forget to write down the names of elements that sound familiar to you. Now, we are finished with lesson 2.1 in Spectrum Science Grade 3. I hope you found this useful. Please don't forget to like my video and subscribe to my channel. Bye for now.